Ready? Okay. Good morning, everyone here in the room joining us and online as well. I want to welcome you all to the 16th Annual Recovery Celebration. We've been celebrating for many years as this is an important topic to celebrate and really come together. It shows the efforts of the community, the full spectrum of care as far as prevention, treatment, recovery. And so we're really happy to have everybody here with us today. My name is Kendall Nagy, and I am the director of the Meridian Anti-Drug Coalition. I am also the Substance Abuse Prevention Coordinator for the Meridian Police Department. My work started with the city back in 2015, and I continue to enjoy what I do. The diversity in my tasks and responsibilities and leading the coalition is an honor. And I also bring some personal passion to this topic. My mother has struggled with depression and addiction for her entire life, and so it touches my heart. And I have a lot of respect for everyone that's impacted, whether it's a direct family member or community members that work with other families. So I appreciate everybody being here. And I'd like to now introduce the Meridian Police Department Chief Pastor Chia, and he will lead us in the Lord's Prayer.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Power and glory are yours now and forever. Amen.
Thank you, Chief. So I'd like to introduce Mayor Robert Simison and provide a little background on his long-term support of the coalition.